Hello and welcome everyone to this evening, the Florentine Together session. I'm Paola Vojnovic, I'm an art historian, and I'm delighted to be interviewing Karole Vail, the director of the Peggy Guggenheim Collection in Venice. Karole, thank you so much for agreeing to spend this hour with us.
It's my great pleasure. Thank you for having me.
And as a past intern of the Peggy Guggenheim, I feel part of my home, part of my heart is always there. I was at the Guggenheim 20 years ago. And I think maybe the first question to launch our interview this evening would be you're Peggy Guggenheim's granddaughter. And I wonder how it was growing up with such an interest in many parts of Peggy in you.
So yes, I'm one of two granddaughters actually. I'm the elder granddaughter of Peggy. I'm the elder granddaughter through my father, who was her son. Well, we didn't. I didn't actually grow up with Peggy in that we didn't live in the same city or in the same country. I mean, she was living in Venice, as we know, from 1949 to 79, and I grew up in Paris with my parents and sister. But yes, we would visit her from time to time, either yes with my parents and my sister, or else later when I was a little older in my teens on my own. If I mean, she wasn't. If you think of your grandmother or grandparent as somebody who bakes you cookies, or well, she wasn't exactly that kind of grandmother. Let's put it that way. And I did find her at times to be a little overbearing. But actually, I think she may have been at times maybe surprisingly timid and reserved, and maybe she didn't quite know how to relate to children and to younger children. But obviously, I'm immensely grateful to my grandmother now for what she's ultimately allowed me to do, because now I'm taking care of her collection in her museum, and I couldn't imagine anything better that I could be doing right now in my life.
Yes. Preparing for our interview, I have, of course, read all the books and Peggy's memoirs. And I was just thinking that she was such an unusual collector. I mean, it will be really hard to come up with another collector similar to Peggy and what she did for the art, not only in Italy, England, and France, and the US, but also literally saving people's lives. I think there is no man or woman that would be, someone who would be comparable to her. I think a life really full of courage and determination. Do you see any parts of that in you?
Well, I don't think I don't think I would ever dare compare myself to the life that she had, and to what she was doing, especially during World War II, as you say, trying to save artists, to bring them over from Europe to the United States, and from besides forming an extraordinary collection, making sure it was safe and bringing it over to America, and then bringing it back to Europe in post-war years. So no, I don't have any of those great qualities. But I do love artists, and in fact, I'm married to one. So so we do we do have that in common.
Yes, yes. There was a picture that was posted on the, I think, Instagram channel of your museum a few months ago, where there is Peggy and some of her grandchildren with one of the paintings on an easel. It was surprising to me to see this beautiful work of art. I think we might have a little bit of problem with connection. So I was.
I'm not quite sure which photo you're referring to.
There was one photograph of you. I mean, no, her other, I think, another grandchild and maybe one of her sons. And there's a painting kind of as a part of this family portrait. And I was wondering, if she loved her children and her grandchildren as much as she loved the paintings in her collection.
Well, let's hope she did. Let's hope she did.
And, talking about the collection in Palazzo Venier dei Leoni, do you have any memories of coming there as a young child? Did you have a chance to meet any of the artists that are today part of the collection?
Well, when I visited Peggy when I was younger, actually more often than not, we didn't meet any artists, unfortunately. But later, and I have to say, after Peggy passed away, I did meet a few, like Emilia Vedova, who was one of the very first artists that she met when she came to Venice in '47, and also Giuseppe Santomaso, whom I visited in his studio. But when I was actually, I mean, visiting her for a holiday, we didn't. I don't think we met any artists, unfortunately. So I know that her palazzo was generally full of extraordinary luminaries, personalities of all types, writers, musicians. Also, her wonderful guest books attest to that. But unfortunately, when I visited, there weren't always a lot of these people around. But maybe it was because of the times, or maybe it was the time dedicated more to family. Of course, there are a lot of artists or personalities that I wish I had met. But even though I probably would have been rather intimidated by them.
I can only imagine, but imagine the richness of Peggy's life and the opportunities she had to connect with people in this very incredible level, and to discover talents, discover people around her, and really bring maybe the best out in them. You became the director of the collection in 2017.
Yes, that's
What
right.
were the challenges that you had to overcome in these 2 years? Before we talk about pandemic, what were the challenges in the normal times?
Yes, so yes, I arrived in Venice in June 2017, after I'd been a curator at the Guggenheim Museum in New York for about 20 years. And that was a very different life as a curator. And I was a curator of modern art, early 20th century art. I didn't work, generally speaking, with contemporary artists. So I think that was the biggest challenge, going from doing research and working in my office, often on my own, or working in the library, delving into boxes and archives, doing something really rather private in many ways. Also working, I was actually working a lot around the history of the Guggenheim Museum, which I always thought was fascinating. Then I was working a lot on some of the lesser known artists in the collection, which I always found to be fascinating. Then when I came to Venice, it was something completely different, because I was, well, much more in the limelight, so to speak. And whereas I didn't necessarily have to interface that much with the many colleagues in New York, here I had to start contending with the whole museum staff, even though it's a small museum staff. And I was had to start dealing with a lot of paperwork, which was very different from the paperwork I was dealing with as a curator and researcher. But it's been a welcome change. I mean, I love being a curator, and changing the installation in the palazzo is still one of my very favorite activities, because to me the collection is absolutely a dynamic entity. The work must not be static. They are living entities which give life to the museum. And so whenever I can have a chance to move paintings and sculptures around and try and come up with new stories to tell about these works, then I'm really pleased to be doing that. But of course, most of my time is spent in the office, but discussing projects with colleagues, looking at the finances, and doing all those things that a director has to do. But it's incredibly exciting. I mean, it's been challenging, but wonderfully interesting, and still exciting in spite of these terrible times we're living through.
Yes, I think being a museum director is definitely not a 9 to 5 job. I think it's something that probably overtakes your life, correct? And I think it becomes such a part of your everyday existence.
Oh, very much so. I mean, it's virtually nonstop, and even when I get home, I'll talk with my husband and ask him what he thinks about this and that. And then, of course, I mean, there's all this the social aspect and the traveling, even though there's not much traveling right now. But the social aspect and meeting colleagues and meeting potential donors and friends of the museum. But that's all very exciting. I mean, it's all part of the rich fabric of the museum life. And I feel just very, very lucky and privileged to be doing this.
Yes. So tell us what happened then when the pandemic hit. How did it affect your museum?
Well, it's been very, very difficult, and yet we are maybe among some of the luckier ones because, well, we were closed for 3 months, nearly 3 months, and that was tough, a shock to everyone all over the world. We did reopen in June, on June 2nd, just at weekends, and we had no idea whether we'd be getting tourists, what it would be like. And we were all just navigating in completely new territory. But at first, what was very interesting is that we noticed that Venetians started to revisit their town and their museums, and so the first tourists at the museum were locals, which was fantastic because while I think that the Peggy Guggenheim Collection is a museum very much enjoyed and recognized by the Venetians, most of our public is international, and we've always wanted to attract the Italians a lot more than we normally do. And this was a time when we did have and continue to have a lot of Italians coming to the museum. So that is fantastic because it's certainly for a local audience and for an Italian audience. And then slowly over the months, we started to open up one extra day at the time, as we saw that we could have that there was that there was interest in coming to the museum, and people very much wanted to come and look at art and spend time in the garden. Of course, it's been difficult to implement because, well, we have to make sure that all the necessary security measures were put into place. But of course, we had to do that like everywhere else, make sure that everyone wears masks, have the gel, mandatory social distancing, so only able to welcome a certain amount of people at a time. Many more guards, security guards, which is very, very expensive. So it was difficult and very much a learning curve, and something that we somehow all managed to do together pretty well at the museum, I must say. And I think that the staff, most of the staff, I would hasten to say all of the staff is very fond of the museum and of the place where they work every day, and so everyone was really engaged and wanting to ensure that that we could bring the museum back to a new kind of normalcy. And I'm pleased to say that in September, at the beginning of September, we managed to reopen 6 days a week. But that is only the Palazzo and the Marchesa. Unfortunately, the temporary exhibition remains closed because we would need just too many security guards, which is a huge expense because we still have to ensure mandatory social distancing. So we're not in a position to open the temporary exhibition, which is a shame, especially now because we just opened in February a temporary exhibition devoted to Peggy's collection of oceanic, African, and Mesoamerican works, which had never been exhibited in their entirety in Venice. And I thought it was a really exciting and important project, and then it came to a halt, which is such a pity. But unfortunately, that's not something we can do. However, the Palazzo is open, and visitors do come to see the permanent collection, which is such a draw. So I have to be grateful for that.
And how about the capacity? How many people can you have in a museum? Is it a 70% or?
Oh, no, it's less. It's well, we can have we have about between 600 and 640 visitors a day now, which is pretty good. We hadn't budgeted on that number in the beginning because we had no idea how things were going to work. But we've been having quite a steady amount of people, which is yes, about 620 people a day, which is not bad, all things considered. But we did have to create a one-way itinerary in order to ensure that there's not too much crowding, and we have to be really quite strict and very strict about the number of people in each room, in each gallery. And as you know, the PGC is quite a small place. We don't have the huge spaces of a Doge's Palace. So we really have to be careful, because we have to ensure the safety of our staff, which is absolutely critical, but then of course of all the visitors.
And have the visitors been understanding? I remember when you reopened those few days a week, people were waiting sometimes for 3 hours outside to be able to come in. And they were glad to do it, correct?
Well, that is true. And then at a certain point, I mean, we weren't able to sustain that for various reasons, also because there were too many clusters of visitors, which wasn't safe. And then now we've implemented virtually completely mandatory bookings online, which makes the whole process much more manageable. And if we're not filled up the whole day, and if somebody does come and doesn't realize that you have to book online, then we check and see when could we possibly ask those people to come back. But yes, it's true that in the beginning, there was we were certainly encouraging online reservations, but a lot of people didn't realize that, because even though it's clearly marked on the website, you don't always check the website, and then sometimes you want to be spontaneous, and then you might only have a couple of days to go to the museum. So, and in summer, when it got very hot, of course, much more difficult. We were, of course, delighted that there were so many people. At the same time, we couldn't guarantee entry, and so often we had to say to people to come back the next day, or to really make an effort and book online, which is something that I would really highly recommend if you want to ensure a visit at the museum.
Probably these measures will have to stay in place for a while.
They will.
Yeah.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Now you have lost a lot of revenue in those 86 days that museum was closed, and I know that you have launched a fundraising campaign. Can you tell us a little bit about that, and also maybe if there is a specific way that the American donors could donate to this campaign, maybe getting some of the benefits for the American citizens?
So yes, we've had to launch a campaign because we don't get any support from the Italian government. So we've appealed to all our members at all levels, all our friends, in supporting us. And so you can really go and click, literally just go and click on our website, and it's a very easy process whereby you can support the museum directly with any amount. Any amount is most welcome. I remember that some years ago, that's exactly what President Barack Obama did. He appealed to everyone by asking them just to even contribute the smallest sum, which helps. Obviously, larger sums are welcome, but even small sums can make such a difference. And that's what we're trying to do, is to appeal to a broader audience and to try and make them understand that, yes, we do need your help. Of course, we understand that the medical emergency is paramount, but we also understand and know that art can bring solace, can bring some peace, can offer something, we hope, which is special and helpful, especially during these times. So if anyone feels that they can support us even in a small way, please just go to our website, and it's very easy. Just in a few simple steps, you can donate any amount you'd like to support the museum, and so that we can also ensure to continue with our mission, because we as a museum are an educational institution, a non-profit institution, and we want to be able to continue offering our free activities, our exhibitions, and that is something, unfortunately, which is very much curtailed at this time. I mean, we've unfortunately have to cancel or postpone exhibitions, much to my chagrin. But this is a time when we really have to tighten our belts. So any help is really most welcome.
Yes, because of course the daily operation of the museum depend mostly on the ticket sales, correct? It's really the
Exactly.
visitors that come in that allow you to do not only to open your doors, but to do the special projects, special programs as well.
Exactly. It's visitor revenue and the sales from our two shops. Only one of our shops is open at this time, and also any kind of special events, because normally you can rent the say the panoramic terrace for a special private dinner, and of course right now we're not able to do that anymore. So yes, it's difficult, but this presents also challenges, and challenges can be exciting, and you have to be creative. But of course, it's tough.
And I also wonder, how much of these things that are now these provisionary measures that, museums are coming up, how much of that will stay in the future? Maybe the online learning, the online opportunities. I don't think it's really going anywhere. I think we are inventing literally a new world as far as the culture goes.
Yes, I think you're right, and I mean, I think what's really important. I mean, I believe that coming to the museum and being there on site, I think the on presence physical experience of the museum is absolutely paramount. I think you can experience the museum when you're there in such a special way. But obviously, and I think more so than ever, we have to be able to develop our digital world. And during the lockdown, we were actually rather successful in providing art history lessons online, podcasts, presentations by interns who were working remotely, because that was also a loss during the lockdown. We had to we couldn't welcome our international interns, and the internship, as you know, is such a critical part of the life of a museum. So I think that we have to develop, and we continue to develop and research and see what we'll be able to do online in a much more comprehensive way. But I think that's absolutely the way that we'll have to go in the future. But we'll have to do that in tandem with the on-site, in-presence visits at the museum, but also the digital virtual part is really just as important, because we also want to be able to reach an audience who might not ever even be able to come to the Peggy Guggenheim collection, just because maybe it's just too far away from their country of origin, it's too expensive. But we want to make sure that we can really literally open our doors and show what we have to a broader public. So this is something that we're very seriously looking into.
Yes. You mentioned the internship program. It's one of its kind in Italy, probably one of the most important international with the internship program now. Can you tell us a little bit about what is happening now, but also the project for the next year?
Yes, so yes, unfortunately, it did come to a halt, but we had a couple of interns who did stay at the museum, and any who had arrived at the museum actually stayed on a bit, but then we weren't able to accept any more interns for quite a while. But in the summer, we started bringing them back again, but they were only European interns or any interns already based in Europe and who could come to Italy easily. And as you know, this international internship program is 40 years old. I mean, this year was, is an anniversary, but we weren't exactly planning on celebrating this way. So we were very pleased that the interns started to come back. And part of my duty is every month to welcome a new group of interns and just tell them a bit about the museum and show them the palazzo. And I must say, every time I've done that in the last couple of months, I've been really thrilled and happy, because it's so nice to see these young people who are coming over to Venice and to the museum to work and learn for a month or 3 months or whatever it might be. And they form such an integral part of the PGC's daily life, because they really interact with all the staff, and they have they really participate in virtually everything that we do here at the museum. And I think it really provides an excellent entree and education to how an institution is run. So the internship is carrying forward. Obviously, we are greatly missing candidates from further abroad, let's say from Australia, from America, from Asia, from Africa. But I'm confident that hopefully next year we'll be getting more and more interns. But right now it's so difficult to know what will happen. At least right now we are able to welcome European interns, or any interns again who are based in Europe or in Italy. And so that is already something very positive. But we did do something very interesting this last summer. We had two digital interns from two American universities, and the whole internship was done online. And so they were doing mostly research. But the universities which support us in this respect really very much wanted to ensure that their students could do the internship. So that was great in many respects. But I'm also very sorry for them that they weren't able to come to Venice and experience Venice and the museum on site, because I mean that's part of the beauty of the internship, is being able to experience and to live in this rather extraordinary city.
I think that's, having been there 20 years ago, I can really say it changed my life. And with my group of interns, we just had a virtual cocktail. It was our 20th anniversary in June.
Yes.
It was really lovely to see. And many of the colleagues I had became really successful in the art careers around the world. So I think definitely shaped who we became. And that's, I think, a wonderful gift that this internship program gives to others. And I hope it will continue to live on.
Absolutely. I mean, it will live on. We'll make sure it lives on. So, and even I just pray, of course, that there won't be another lockdown, and I hope there won't be, but we will go on welcoming the interns, and we want them here, and we need them here.
Yeah. Carole, when I visited, you were so kind to open the collection, and I was able to enjoy it all almost by myself with your wonderful curator. And I wanted to say the collection never looked better. I have seen some of the pieces. Many works of art also by women.
Mm-hmm.
And I wanted to ask you if this is your curatorial choice. Did you bring these ladies out because it's part of the Me Too movement? What was behind it?
Well, I have to say, it doesn't really have anything to do with the Me Too movement. I mean, I believe that the women artists should be there regardless of any movement.
I agree.
It is true, but there are not that many women artists in the collection. I guess Peggy was collecting at a time when it was much more difficult for women to make their mark. Even though, as you know, she did support women artists with group exhibitions, with solo exhibitions, and she did buy their work. She didn't often and always keep a lot of their work. She would give it away or try and sell it. We mustn't either forget that none of her advisors were women. I mean, her advisors were, of course, extraordinary people like Marcel Duchamp, Herbert Reed, and Howard Putzel, and Mondrian. But I think that I've always been very keen on the underdog, and even when I was at the Guggenheim in New York, I always wanted to try and find those artists who were lesser known, whether they were men or women, as long as they had something interesting to say and to convey. I thought it was worth really bringing the work out of the storage. So here in Venice, I've tried to ensure that we bring out some work which is less known and which deserves to be seen. So right now, in fact, we have this great painting by Grace Hartigan, who belonged to that group of women, including Helen Frankenthaler and Lee Krasner and Joan Mitchell and Elaine de Kooning. And it's this painting is rather extraordinary. It's not necessarily my favorite, but it's the only painting by an American abstract expressionist that we have. Even though she didn't actually she didn't believe that she was either really abstract or figurative. So she didn't want to be defined in any particular way, but she was definitely part of that important group of women. But what is curious is that Peggy actually bought this painting in 1959 when she was in New York, presumably for the opening of her uncle Guggenheim's museum on Fifth Avenue. Even though Guggenheim he died 10 years before, and so never saw the museum accomplished. But Peggy visited Grace Hartigan in her studio in New York and bought this huge painting that Grace Hartigan had painted in 1958, and which was entitled Ireland. She was of Irish descent, and the trips that she made to Ireland were, I think, fundamental for her and for her development as an artist. And it's interesting that Peggy bought actually such a large painting. I mean, it's the biggest painting literally that we have in the collection. So it's also not terribly easy to hang, to be perfectly honest. I mean, it's nearly twice as big as Pollock's Alchemy. But I must say it's in a room with, in fact, Alchemy, Enchanted Forest, and Emilie Vedova, also with the Moon Woman, Clifford Still, and Gorky, and it looks terrific. I mean, it really has a great presence. It's strong, and maybe Peggy also was making some kind of statement. I don't think she always liked necessarily what she acquired. I mean, I think she had some favorites, but she understood that she had to transform a comprehensive collection of modern art, though I would say that there are a few gaps here and there, but that's also what makes the collection so special. But I do find it interesting that she acquired this huge painting, which is not easy to place. There's also another great work which is actually a recent acquisition, so which is not strictly part of a Peggy Guggenheim collection, but it is a work that belonged to her once upon a time. It's a beautiful small work by the American abstract artist Irene Rice Pereira, to whom Peggy gave a solo exhibition at Art of the Century in 1944. And Pereira was also an artist who was very sought after by Solomon Guggenheim and his German advisor and founding director of Museum of Non-Objective Painting, the forerunner of the Guggenheim Museum, Hilary Bay. So Pereira, interestingly enough, was both collected and supported by both Rebay and Peggy Guggenheim, which I think is quite interesting. Anyway, Pereira was an interesting artist because she was fascinated by the relationship between art and science. And she was interested in using non-traditional materials such as glass and metal, and she was very keen on exploring the properties of light in her work. And so this work, which did belong to Peggy and which had been exhibited in Pereira's solo show in 1944, was acquired just before I arrived in summer 2017 in honor of the previous director. And it's a beautiful little piece. It's really exquisite. And she was also influenced by Mondrian, and a highly accomplished and fascinating artist. And so I'm delighted to have that on view. And then we also have a Leonard Fini on view. And as you know, the Peggy Guggenheim collection is very rich in surrealist works. And this is a beautiful small work by Fini. But then there's not much else, except for a few sculptures in the garden. I mean, we have that great Germaine Richier. And then, of course, there are the Claire Falkenstein gates. And then
which are so beautiful, and the way she was able to incorporate pieces of Venetian glass in them. I mean, they are probably my most favorite work of art in all of Venice.
Yes, it is. It's a beautiful gateway and entrance to the palazzo, and wonderful how she's combined the metal with this translucent Murano glass, and they're really quite special. So yes, so I am again. There are not that many women artists, and of course, I want to highlight. I want to highlight them, and at some and we did have in the program some exhibitions devoted to women artists like Lygia Clark, which would have been so important to bring here, but unfortunately, it hasn't been able to come to Venice. It's still at Guggenheim in Bilbao. But our exhibition next year, Surrealism and Magic, from Max Ernst to Leonora Carrington, will include many works by many women artists, including Carrington herself, Remedios Varo, Frida Kahlo, Leonor Fini, just to
Wow.
name a few. So that will be a very yes, a very important moment, I think, for us. A great moment for scholarship in the surrealist field, so to speak. A lot of women will be represented with some of the most significant works that they've made, which relate to magic and alchemy and ideas of transformation. And absolutely, one thing is sure, there's got to be then a solo exhibition devoted to a woman artist at some point. So as soon as we can start getting our exhibition program rolling again, we'll start very seriously thinking about solo exhibitions dedicated to women.
So much to look forward to. You know, Peggy loved Venice so much. For her, it was like a dream city, and I'm not surprised that she decided to settle there. I mean, she was able to choose, right? The whole world was really there for her. And I wondered when we met in July, we were talking a little bit about the city of Venice and how the people who are now there, mostly older Venetians, you can really see the lack of tourists. So the lack of these thousands of crowds coming in now really exposes what the city has, which is very few people living there. And I wonder, what do you think is the future of Venice? Do you think the cruise ships will disappear from the city in any future? What do you think is the solution for Venice?
Well, well, I wish I had a magic wand. That's a tough one. I
I
mean,
know.
we know how beautiful Venice is, and I think we must remember how delicate Venice is, and I think it's actually the responsibility of everyone to understand how delicate Venice is and how carefully she must be taken care of, and it's everyone's responsibility to ensure that Venice is still here tomorrow for future generations. But that means that we most probably have to be stricter with ourselves in looking after Venice. And I understand that Venice should be available to anyone, for anyone to visit. I mean, Venice is part of the World Heritage, but at the same time, it's a place to take care of. It's a place which is so fragile, and I don't think that everyone always realizes that when tourists come maybe just for a day or two or even 3 days. I don't think they necessarily realize how fragile it is and what a fragile ecosystem it is. And right now, also, in fact, we've had a bit of aqua alta, nothing drastic, but as you know, Piazza San Marco is where aqua alta appears most quickly because it is at such a low point of the city. And I think a lot of tourists think, oh, what fun, look at the water and how amazing. And of course, at first, it might seem like, well, it is extraordinary and you don't expect it. But at the same time, when you live there, and I haven't been living there very long, you realize, well, yes, of course, it's strange, it's beautiful in some ways, but at the same time, this is also killing the city. And so we really have to take care of it. So I hope that the ships won't come back. I wish that we could ensure that there are more residents. I think that Venice could become such an important place, such a crucial, such a great hub for scientific research. and I think because here we are living climatic changes I mean, so strongly every day. Well, what a great place to be able to study and to research what climate is doing here. But it's so difficult. It's so difficult to predict. I mean, I must say, but right now, with not so many tourists, it's a lot more pleasurable. It makes it easier to walk around. But we also need young people to come back, and we need them to be able to live here adequately. But that also means adequate infrastructure. So we need a visionary or two to really understand the future of Venice. Of course, the past and Venice's historic past is so rich and so extraordinary. But we must also look to the future. But we have to really make sure that we do the right thing. And unfortunately, I don't have the magic wand, but I would like to, in my own small way, to try and make people understand that yes, this is a beautiful place to visit, but at the same time, you have to respect it fully. And so certain measures, I think, will have to be taken at some point. Not quite sure what those measures need to be. You don't want to prevent people from coming here, but maybe you have to ensure that there are some kind of ticketed entrances, or that anyway, there must be some solutions, and I believe that there will have to be some solutions if we want Venice to go on being an extraordinary place which can be enjoyed by many people, but at the same time respected as it deserves to be.
You know, it was such an unlikely city. I mean, that the fact that it was built and that it exists, it's a miracle on its own. And I think people will have to come back. Just the regular families to come back and live there, I think would make a big difference. I think at the height of its might, when Venice has probably 150,000 people were living there.
Yes.
And I can just imagine how vibrant and beautiful that life was. Let's all do our little parts but we can. I know also that Peggy didn't really want the collection ever to leave Palazzo Venier dei Leoni, unless there was a huge aqua alta or some kind of danger for the collection, correct?
That is true. That is true. I mean, Peggy had been courted by many institutions, but then she realized that, in fact, she wanted the collection and the museum to remain within the Guggenheim Foundation fold, and then she wanted the collection to remain in Venice, understandably. And I think the Peggy Guggenheim Collection, I mean, is just such an integral part of Venice culture, of Venetian identity, which is rather extraordinary. And I can only imagine that she would be amazed, but I would assume also really quite proud, but also quite tickled at the thought that the collection that she put together is now such a resounding success.
Yes, truly extraordinary. I think, the time is running by so quickly. I'm sure there's probably some questions coming in from our viewers as well, but maybe just one last question. They say that people in the world are divided into two groups, those that love Venice and those that love Florence. And you have lived in both cities. So which one has your heart?
Well, I think maybe Venice right now, because this is where I'm living and working. So, but I love, I love the water, but I love the countryside. And I just love the Florentine, the Tuscan countryside. I think it's absolutely exquisite. I love that landscape, but I also love the water. I love the laguna. I love the aquatic life. So I love them both. I love them both for different reasons. And I guess I'm just so lucky to have been able to live in both cities, and being able to, yes, to experience them has been very special. But I would say that Venice is my place right now.
Oh, I totally understand. So do we have any questions coming in? Maybe Jane Farrell can help us with that.
Hello, thank you so much. First of all, that was thoroughly enjoyable listening to such inspiring discussion about the collection and also the future of museums, which I think is something everybody's watching with attention to see what it would mean for such important collections. So it's very interesting to hear about how you're handling those certain difficulties. We have actually not had a question, but I think that just means you've addressed so many things in your discussion. What has come in is huge admiration for the collection. Somebody mentioned here that it's one of their all-time favorites and that the works are so beautifully and thoughtfully displayed and they can't wait to return. So I think that's the general message from viewers, is that they're waiting until they can once again walk the corridors and see the amazing works. So I'll hand it back to you to finish your discussion.
Well, of course, and so it'll be a pleasure to welcome Kaylee to Venice.
Yes. Carol, it's fascinating that the last interview Peggy had in her lifetime was just about 6 months before she died. So I think even though she was very shy and actually reserved, we know so much about her life. And even the last documentary that came out brought in the new tapes that no one has heard before. So there was so much about Peggy that kind of maybe still remains unknown. I think sometimes she was not given this role of a giant that she actually was in the art of Europe in the 20th century. But one of the questions that was on those tapes is the interviewer asked her, "Did you have a crazy life?" And she has the life full of art and love.
Oh, and Paola, sorry, you were there was a little bit of an interruption. Sorry.
Yes.
Can you...
Yes, I'll repeat it. So one of the questions the interviewer had for Peggy, they asked her, "Did you have a crazy life?" And Peggy said, "Yes, I had a crazy life. It was full of art and love." And I thought it was such an amazing lesson, I think, for all of us, especially in these crazy times we are living in. I think if we can have art and love in our life, I think it's a rich and meaningful existence.
I totally agree. And that's why we were so keen and just had to, reopen the museum. And even though it's difficult and we've launched a campaign, we understand that we must open it because I believe in the transformative powers of art. And that's something which has often been dear to artists, especially at the beginning of the 20th century. I think of artists like Kandinsky, who believed in the regenerative power of art, and that how art could really help transform and make society and make society better. So I just hope that here at the Peggy Guggenheim Collection, visitors can come and enjoy the collection, of course, can come and sit in the garden, can enjoy the Grand Canal, and just enjoy the life and spirit of Peggy Guggenheim. So I think if we can go on offering that as best we can, then hopefully part of our mission will have been accomplished.
Yes, so true. Carol, thank you so much for your time.
You're very welcome.
I'll very much look forward to see the museum again, to see the upcoming exhibitions when the world goes to normal. And I want to just thank everyone for tuning in today. It was a true honor to do this interview for the Florentine Together. And I hope to see everyone again soon.
Wonderful. Thank you, Paola. See you in Venice.
Grazie mille.
Ciao, grazie.
Arrivederci.